Alright, so we're getting back onto the Land Cruiser project again. So last time I had all the links and everything figured out for the front end, got the whole suspension in and functional, and as you can see now I've taken it all apart because it's time to go ahead and start welding up all the brackets and all the frame extensions up here, get all that taken care of. I've also got all the links over here to weld along with the pitman arm, and getting all the link brackets and everything on the front end done, as well as getting the locker and gears put in it. So that's where I'm at, and get started on welding stuff up on the frame. Alright, since I know I'm using this hole for the panhard bar, I'm going to go ahead and cut this off up here, and also cut it off on the other half of this bracket too. Get rid of that before I weld everything up here. So here's everything all cut down, ready to go. So now it's just a matter of getting that and all the other brackets on the axle all welded up, and then we can go ahead and start working on getting the locker and gears put in. Alright, well, I've got everything all welded up on here. I went ahead and I added another eyelet here for suck down winch if I ever decide I want to do that. Probably won't, but have the option at least. I also drilled a hole in here because otherwise this thing is just a big ball that's going to fill up with all kinds of mud and crap, so at least gives me a place to drain that out. So, see, I also started working on getting my brake lines sorted out while I've got it here. So I pretty much got all my brackets in place, got the lines bent up, so that part of it's ready to go. This end is going to wind up coming up and attaching onto the upper link, so I'll have brackets on the link for that. So once I get all this stuff final welded, the housing's pretty much done. And since I've got the housing pretty much done, I figure it's time to get these knuckles finished up. So the first step, we take these steering arms over, we'll throw them in the mill, get them machined up and looking like they're supposed to. And here's the arms all machined up pretty, ready to go. This one now, as I say, I've got to cut it off, basically rotate this end to make it match up with the angle on the drag link a little better. So I'm going to throw that in the saw, get it cut off. So I got my pieces cut here, got the ends tapered. If you can kind of see on this end, the taper is basically set so that when this is tilted up at the angle I want it, that both sides match up with each other basically. So when we put them together, put that little twist to it, and that ridge right there meets up the way it's supposed to all the way across. So I'll go ahead and get this tacked up and see about getting it welded. Now here it is tacked up, and here you can see a little better what I'm talking about, where those points all come together. Same on both sides. And we've got, hard to tell, but got that twist put in the end, so it'll take the strain off of that tie rod end on the drag link. So now I'll go ahead and just fill all this up with weld. And here it is all welded up. Should be good to go. I'm just going to go ahead and grind everything down, make it look like I meant to do that, and see what that looks like. And here's what it looks like all ground down, ready to go. So it's probably Not quite as strong as if it was one solid piece, but for the purposes of what we're doing here, it's going to be plenty strong enough. So since the ram is actually going to be doing most of the steering, which is attached back in here, so out here where the drag link is just kind of going to be guiding things along, and this is going to be plenty strong for that. All right, now that I got the steering arm done, I went ahead and bolted it in place with the tie rod. So I've got this piece of tube here. It goes down through the original tie rod hole in the knuckle. So that'll kind of sandwich everything together, give me a good double shear connection on that tie rod end. And then also I've got this piece plate that I cut that's going to weld in here. So that'll tie this back to the main body of the knuckle itself. So should be plenty strong by the time tube gets welded on, this all gets welded up. This thing should be a good solid connection to that knuckle. So here it all tacked up. I went ahead and pulled the tie rod and everything off just so I don't overcook that heim joint. And so now I'm going to take the torch and heat up the knuckle all in the area I need to weld, make sure I get a decent preheat and post heat on this thing so that it doesn't try and crack these welds. Alright, now we'll let that cool down nice and slow and should be good to go. We'll repeat the process on the other side. Alright, and here it is all cooled down and assembled. So everything's pretty well finished up on the knuckles now, so now it's just a matter of painting up the pieces and getting them ready for final assembly. I got everything all welded up, went ahead and painted it, got my gears and locker installed, so that's all ready to go. So I think what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and assemble this whole thing, get it all put together and ready to run. We're pretty much to that point, and then it'll be just a matter of finishing things up. So here it is with the front axle pretty much completely assembled. Everything's all in place. See, I started running my brake line and air locker line, run them up the link so that they're all nice and protected. Got my ram in there. I started kind of routing my hydraulic hoses so I know where they need to go. So now I think I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the box off and I'm going to drill and tap the holes for the hydraulic lines so I can get those hooked up and see how these lines fit. These are just the old lines that I've been using for my hydro assist from my previous setup. So far it looks like they're long enough and will work for what I'm doing here. We'll see how that works out. So the first step in getting this box drilled and tapped, I'm going to pull the bolts off of this top cap. That should slide out. Cap, sector shaft, that gear, all that stuff should come out, and then that'll give me enough room I can see in here, make sure I'm not going to hit anything in here that I don't want to when I drill that. This front one, I'm going to kind of drill blind a little bit, but it should be fine. There's enough meat up here to be able to drill and tap into. Shouldn't get to anything in there anyway. Alright, that actually made less of a mess than I thought it might. So, yeah, looks like we should be good to go right there. And yeah, like I said, the front's probably going to be fine, so I'm going to go ahead and get these things drilled. Alright, so that's got that hole drilled. So I got a bunch of rags stuffed in here. That should catch most of the chips that might try and fall down in there. Clean it out as best we can after we're done here too. Normally with a pipe tap you go until it basically all but bottoms out to get the full taper. I don't really want to go that deep on this one, so I'm going to back the tap out, try the fitting I'm going to use and see how it fits. Okay, so that basically so far is getting about one thread in there, so I kind of know where I'm at. So I know I need to run the tap a little bit deeper. Right, so I ran that tap in a few more turns, getting to where I've got full engagement of the threads with as much material as I've got on the box, so it's just barely poking through on the inside. So I'm going to call that good. I don't want to bury this thing in here because I don't know 100% sure that I've got clearance for that. So I'm going to run it like this, and like I said, I'm getting full engagement through the material of the box, so it's as strong as it's going to get. So you can see, in order to keep the shavings and everything from going into the box as much as possible, so you've got a little grease on that bit, so the chip should stick to that for the most part. And then because I'm drilling this offset here, I should be able to flip this thing over and fish out any other chips with a magnet once I'm done here. So finish drilling this hole. And yeah, you can kind of see the chips get stuck in the grease. We'll do the same thing with the tap. Get that hole tapped and put this box back together, and that's one more thing off the list here. So here we are all done. Got a little Teflon tape on the fittings, got them screwed in where they're going to be. While I had the box out, I also went ahead and installed the adapter fittings for the pressure and return line coming into it. So now I guess I'm ready to stick this thing back on and actually call it installed. We'll get all right. And that thing is just stupidly heavy. All right, that's where it goes. And here it is all put together. So I got the hoses routed where they need to go. I'm still going to have to make up my pressure and return lines. They're going to be a little interesting because it's going to be kind of short, but yeah, everything's all in place. I'm going to wind up making a piece that'll clamp onto these lines and bolt them to the frames to kind of keep those under control. But other than that, that's all come together. So I think steering's pretty well wrapped up. Like I said, other than my pressure and return lines, the hard part's done. So next time I'm going to work on getting the front of the frame finished up. Like I said, I'll get those hose clamps put together, get that all sorted out. I think I might actually be able to shorten this hose up a little bit. But for now, it's looking pretty good. Yeah, well, it's time to get back on to buttoning up this front end. So last time I got all the major components in place. Everything's all working like it's supposed to. So just going to be some details that need to be addressed. One of which I'm going to build a clamp that'll hook onto these two tubes, kind of be able to bolt them down so they can't go anywhere. I'll probably build another one that'll go right in here to kind of hold them together, just to kind of clean up the look of everything a little bit. So to do that, I have this sheet of some 1-inch thick high density polyethylene. So I'm going to go cut up some pieces of that and start working on making some clamps. So these pieces here are going to be the start of my little hose clips. So basically I got 2 pieces for each one. They're 5/8 thick. They'll wind up clamping together. So I'll drill holes for the hose to go through on the center line, and then they'll get drilled through for bolt to go through them to squeeze it all together. And then we'll clean them up, sand them, make them look nice. Okay, so now I got the 2 halves drilled, ready to go around the hose. So now I'm going to drill and counterbore for an Allen bolt to go through it. The one at the frame, I'll use a little longer bolt so it'll actually go through both pieces and thread into the frame and bolt it down there. And then the other one, I'll have to figure out some way to get a nut in here so that they can just hold the hoses separated the way I want them to. I'll put that on the floor. I want to put that on the floor. Alright, so I got these things all roughly shaped out, so now I'm going to take it over to the sander and I'll just kind of round all the edges on it, give it a little bit more finished look, see if I can get some of the machine marks out of it and everything and make it look decent. And here's my finished parts. On the one that's just going to be kind of floating, I drilled or counterbored the hole in the back just big enough to get a nut to kind of press itself in there as I tighten things up. And then I said this one, I've got enough sticking out there that I can drill and tap the frame to attach it where I want it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and get these put on. All right, that pretty much fits perfect. So I think the other one is going to go up here on the frame. I'll get it put on the hoses, but I don't think I'm going to drill and tap the frame just yet until I know this is exactly where everything's got to go. All right, that looks like that's going to work. Like I said, I'm going to wait until I get everything else put together, but I'm pretty sure this is where it's going to live. So I'll just drill and tap straight into the frame. So this will bolt down and hold everything in place right where it's supposed to be. It's going to work good. All right, so kind of off camera, I've been working getting some of this plumbing done. So I've got all of my power steering hoses and everything hooked up. It kind of looks like a mess, but it's pretty tight trying to fit everything in there, but it's in there and it'll work. And see up in there, got return lines coming from the box going out here. I got this little transmission cooler I installed behind the grill, and then running back up into the pump. Kind of had to run around the outside here on the box to make everything fit without getting that line too close to the headers. Need to have that melt off, but that's pretty much all the plumbing done on this thing. So now I just need to hook up the steering column, which you see here, the previous setup, I had to pass through this tube. Well, I still have to pass through that tube, just in a different location now. So I'm going to wind up, see I got it marked here, I'll cut that out, and then I'll get my steering shaft built, and then I'll figure out what I got to do to piece that back together. So first step, get this thing cut out. Alright, so I managed to get that chunk cut out of there without even cutting into my headers or plug wires or nothing. Of course, it is the most crooked cut I think I've ever made, but I can fix that. So yeah, now I can kind of get mocked up where the steering shaft has to go and see what things are going to look like. And here's the beginning of my steering shaft. So this is the upper half from what I used before. You can see it's got a U-joint on the end of it that slides up onto the steering column. This is just a piece of 1 inch, like 120 wall square tube, and then I've got a piece of 3/4 inch 095 wall tube that slides up into it, and that's going to go run just about like that. So on this end down here, I'm going to machine a piece that will go into this square tube, and then the end of this U-joint is a double D, call it shape. So machine something that'll slide up in here, and then put it all together and weld it up, and that should be my steering shaft. Alright, here's my piece all machined up, ready to go. So this is going to slide in here. I'll wind up leaving a little gap there so I've got some room to weld it. And then this go onto there. And then, yeah, gonna be a little funky to get that weld gap where I want it to be. And that, yeah, so we'll sit right about there. Right now, you see everything, this turns inside here, so I can get the steering wheel lined up straight, get the steering box straight. Then once everything's all exactly where I want it, I can go ahead and get this tacked up, and it should be pretty much where I want to be. Yeah, not too much to it. So I'm going to slide it in there, see what it looks like. So here's where everything wants to be. So see, I've got some marks on the box here, on this, the outside of the box, the rubber flap, and the shaft there that all line up. So that means that the box is pointed straight ahead, is dead center. I've got the steering wheel pointed to straight ahead. So now I can just give myself a little gap there, and I can weld these two pieces together, and we should be good to go. All right, so I got this piece welded up. I also went ahead and dimpled it where the set screws are going to go, so they'll have a little something more to bite into. Get this on the right way. Go in just like that. And snug those up. Right. I can slide it back on the other half of the shaft and get it hooked up to the steering box. So here it is all in place. So it's actually got the steering wheel connected down to the steering box now. So that part's good to go. I just need to fill this gap here right now. So I'm going to have to figure out what it's going to take to do that. But that shouldn't be too difficult. I think I am definitely going to have to square up these cuts a little bit. I really got those crooked. So But that shouldn't be too tough to do. Just grind them straight, and then I'll figure out what I got to do to get that shaft to pass through the tube. But first thing I need to do is straighten out the cuts on here so I can just make a straight cut on the tube that's going in there. So what I like to do to make that a little easier is take a hose clamp like that, put that over, and when you tighten that down, you can kind of make sure it squares itself up, and then you can use the edge of that hose clamp to mark where square is on the tube, and then be able to cut to that. Makes for a pretty convenient way to come up with a nice straight cut. Alright, so here I've got my marks made. Now I know where I'm going to need to grind them down to. I think I'm also going to grab my welding blanket and put it back here so I don't throw a bunch of sparks into all my wiring and plug wires and all that sort of stuff. Alright, so there we go. Make sure they're much straighter cut. Get this other one done, and then I'll be able to measure up for the tube that I need to go in between and figure out where my pass-through needs to be. I got my ends squared up now, so now I'm ready to figure out where my tube needs to be that the steering shaft's going to pass through. So in order to do that, I've got the bottom half of the shaft over here. This is the tube that it's going to go through. So in order to make it so that the tube is sitting on the shaft the way that I want it, what I think I'm going to do is I got some packing material here. I'll wrap around the shaft so that it's tight on that, and then I kind of cram that over the top of the packing material, and that should hold this reasonably well centered where I want it onto the shaft. So see how that works. Yeah, looks like I'm going to need a little bit more. Let's see how that fits. Alright, that should work. I'll hold that tube pretty good and centered on the shaft so I can kind of position it up and down wherever it needs to be and figure out how the other piece needs to fit. And this is how that worked out. So this is being held pretty much right where I want it. It's got about an equal gap all the way around. So I've got my piece of tube cut that's going to go in here. So I'm just going to have to notch this piece out for that piece to fit into it. So I'll get that notch figured out and make that happen. Alright, this is my setup to notch this tube. So I made a mark here that was at the center line and in line with the steering shaft. So I'm going to line up the hole saw onto that. Also, it's about a 1/2 inch from this edge back to that pass-through tube. So I got that. Got a little machinist jack on the end here to try and keep this end from pushing down as I go through it, because I don't have a whole lot up here that I'm holding on to. So it's mildly sketchy, but we'll see what happens. Alright, that'll work. Alright, we'll see how this thing fits. Yeah, it's not too bad. Pretty much notched right onto there. Got a little gap at the top, a little at the bottom, which I want. So I'm going to run some 1¼ inch tube inside there, just as kind of a weld backer. And then I'll probably reinforce from the pass-through tube up onto here, just tie everything together as best I can, since this tube is load bearing, since I've got my shock mounts up there onto that hoop. So I'll see about getting a couple pieces of that 1¼ inch cut, and then try and start getting things tacked in. All right, so here's the pieces all put together. So you can see I've got the 1¼ inch tube in there as a less of a sleeve, more just a backer for the weld. So I should be able to get a good strong weld in there. Fortunately, this end still unbolts off of here, so I was able to take this off and then get those sleeves all in place and just kind of rock everything up into place. So now I'll go ahead and get things tacked up and see how it's all looking. Here it is all tacked up. Everything's looking pretty good. Shaft's running pretty much through the center of that tube. Yeah, it doesn't want to hit anything when I steer. There's no rubbing going on there, so that's good. So yeah, I think it's ready to weld up, and then I'll figure out what I want to do to kind of reinforce the back side of it here, get that thing as strong as I can get it. Okay, here's our finished product. Got it all welded up, painted. See, I actually put a piece of 1/4 inch on the back side of that goes around that pass-through tube to kind of brace everything up. So now everything on my steering is hooked up. So pretty much ready to go. Now it's just only other thing I need up front here is to get the shocks mounted, and yeah, that's pretty much done.